Hello, folks. Welcome back to WWII TV, and we are continuing our look, as you can see in the titles there, at the Monte Cassino campaign. My guest today is historian and battlefield guide Dr. Danila Bracaglia, and she is going to talk to us about some of the people and veterans she has toured with over the last few years and her experience guiding the Monte Cassino battlefield. So I'm glad to bring her in now. Good evening. You've been busy with tours this recently, I got here.
Good evening, Paul. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, very busy in Monte Cassino, and that's rare because we don't get so many visitors like, for example, Normandy. But this year, for the 80th anniversary, there are relatives, especially children of veterans, coming to for the commemorations, and especially Poles. Like there will be the ceremony on the 18th of May.
Yep.
Because that's when the Poles enter into the monastery, and so that's it.
Yeah. So we know, living as I do in Normandy, you can't grow up in Normandy without seeing memorials, cemeteries, plaques everywhere you go, and so people just grow up with at least an understanding that it's a historic area. But where you grew up in Italy, is World War II a big thing? How was it a big part of your growing up? How did you get interested in the battlefields yourself?
Actually, World War II, it's in Italy, it's not very well known, unfortunately. Especially in school, you don't learn much about it. And my background is in history, but ancient history. I study archaeology. And so things changed when I became, just by chance, the cultural guide of a group of veterans. And these veterans were veterans, same unit that liberated my hometown. I live about 40 kilometers north of Cassino towards Rome on the famous Highway 6. So this was actually the only road at the time. So since the Roman time, from the 4th century BC until 1964, was the only road from Naples to Rome. So controlled and occupied by the Germans since we changed side. Coming to your questions, so I didn't know much about the war. And when I met these veterans and I was with them as a cultural guide 1 week, I really felt I needed to know more about, because that was such an important page of our history, common history, and the most recent. At school, we don't learn much about, and just briefly the Second World War, but not what happened here. So when because I'm a professional guide in Italy, we take tests. I don't know if in France it's like that, but we do take tests, and then but this is most of the guides don't do battlefield tours. And in Italy, it's different, I think, from France. I've been to France. I've seen, monuments, and as you said, everywhere. Not in Italy. That's because in Italy, I think there is a different history for the Second World War. I mean, we were with the Germans first for 3 years. But when the war started at home, and that was the 8th September 1943, we're just a few hours before the landing in Salerno. So that was confusing for everyone. And this is what I say during my tours, Salerno. So everybody was celebrating the end of the war. The Allies were going to land in Salerno. They thought, that's easy. Italy is going to be easy because the Italians had surrendered. And the Italians that night were celebrating to realize that, the Germans had, of course, a complete different idea. And from the 8th September 43 started the occupation. For the Italians, you have to think about the Italians like farming communities, like Cassino or my town. So 80% were farmers, and they were not really involved with politics. Maybe Rome or big cities is different. But my father, for example, because my father was 8 years old during the war, and Frosinone was occupied by the Germans soon after we surrendered. So they took all the, they took, for example, the road to Rome, so the Highway 6, the towns, the mountain, the high ground was occupied by the Germans, and our time, and then at the same time, the towns were bombed by the Allies because they were occupied by the Germans. So, and that's why maybe the Italians, after 2 years of occupation and bombing and destruction, the families wanted to forget about. And any actually, my family living in this area had family members that lost their lives. So for different reasons. That's for Germans' reactions against Italians or for the bombing. Like my town, so we surrendered to the Allies on the 8th September. On the 10th September, Cassino was bombed for the first time, which is on the Highway 6. And my town, 11th September, was bombed. So the people really didn't understand what was going on. They felt between these two fires, Allied and Germans' occupation. So that's why they wanted to forget. And that was a page of the history they really want to remove and go on with their lives. And I always say, I can understand the family because, like, for example, in my family, there were two. My grandmother was killed, one of the many civilians, so my great-grandmother, and 10,000 civilians were actually killed in 6 months. So I understand that the family and the people wanted to remove, to just forget this page of history. But what I think is the school that has a different role. So the school should teach what happened, just because it's part of our history, and it's good to remember what happened. As we say, if we forget, then we will repeat the same mistake. Yeah.
Well, that's a great introduction, and I'm just thinking of the question I'm going to ask you next, which is,
yes, sorry,
in Normandy.
But it didn't answer your question.
No, it was great. In Normandy, the guides always think, how much background do you do? Do you literally start on the morning of June the 6th with the landing craft approaching the beaches, or do you kind of start with the occupation of France and the build up? And one of the things, every time we've done an Italian series, we did Salerno week, we did an Anzio week, now it's Monte Cassino. There's a lot of complicated things, that the Allies try one bit, then they try something else, then they change direction. The Canadians are on the west coast, then they're on the east coast, then they're on the west coast. When you meet a group of people and start a casino tour, where do you start the story? I mean,
that's really difficult, but first of all, in Cassino, I meet so many nationalities because
that's true. Yeah.
So many, like countries fought here in the 4 battles, Canadians and New Zealanders and Americans, Gurkhas, Indians, Polish descendants that then, the Poles that were with the 8th British Army, then the Poles that come to Cassino are not coming from Poland. They come from all over the world because they couldn't go back or they didn't want to go back to Poland. That became a Soviet satellite. So I'll meet people, from all over the world, and that's I think unique opportunity to exchange our culture. To it's not only the Second World War, but it's an exchange of. I mean, I would never meet without this job people from all over the world, from a town, a small town like Cassino. So Cassino became such an important place in the history for months. Also because that became, it was not fast. If you think the Italian campaign is a sideshow compared, or this is the way the Allied thought, to divert here as many German divisions as possible, and considering Italy a sideshow compared to other battlefields like Normandy, and that the fact that in Italy you got to have you had limited resources on the Allied point of view, and Eisenhower didn't want to take any resources for D-Day, so the soldiers that fought here fought in miserable conditions, limited resources with the Germans on a high ground, and the key of the German defense was the high ground. And then with its limited resources, until they didn't understand that that you needed were overwhelming forces, because if you have one German division on a high ground and an American or a British division attacking, is not going to work.
No.
So that's why, it's sad in a way that the Italian campaign is a forgotten campaign. Sad for the soldiers that fought here, and they deserve the same respect of any other soldier that fought in the Second World War.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's this is the debate we have: is something truly forgotten? It's not forgotten, but it's not remembered as well as some other battles. I mean, we're estimating there will be 1 million people in Normandy in June for the 80th. I don't expect Cassino will get 1 million people. It'll get a few extras, sure.
I was, I mean, on the 22nd January, because the last January there was the 80th anniversary of the Anzio landing, for example. Just to tell, do you know how many Americans were at the American cemetery during one? And he was with me. So one American there was on the 24th January during the ceremony at the American cemetery in Nettuno.
Wow.
Now it's true that the French are more organized than the Italians, and the fact that I saw that, for example, in Normandy, you have already since 2 years ago the calendar of events.
Yeah.
And here is not as well as organized, must be said. But the fact is there is a forgotten campaign, and the people that come here, for my experience, are 90% of the time children of veterans. They want to understand and want to see their battlefields. So there are some that are interested, World War II or World War II buffs, but that's a very limited number of people.
And we the other thing about the Cassino battle is it is dominated by the name Monte Cassino, the monastery on the hill. And I use it in my title sequence. We don't have that with Normandy. Normandy has lots of different places: Saint-Lô and Caen and Cherbourg and the hedgerows and the beaches. But this whole campaign is symbolized by that ancient structure on a hill that everybody needed. And of course, you must have to then explain that is. It's part of everybody's stories, but of course, the wider battlefield includes numerous hills and mountains and valleys and rivers and the Liri Valley and the Gary, and so the Cassino as a symbol, it must help you because it does have that identity. People have heard of Monte Cassino, but at the same time, they probably must arrive not really knowing much about the wider campaign.
It's exactly like that, because as the veterans often didn't speak much about, and they speak about, Cassino, but then maybe they fought 70 kilometers from Cassino, on south of Cassino. I had, for example, an American family that told me, my uncle died in Cassino in October 43. That's impossible, because the Battle of Cassino, for Cassino itself, started in January. And in fact, his uncle died in Monte Pantano, which is 70 kilometers from Cassino, but it's called the Battle of Cassino, or the Battle of Anzio, but it's never Anzio or Cassino. It's a large area, just like Normandy.
So let's look at some of your slides that you sent me, and we'll go through some of that, because let's start with your first veteran, and we've got some various stories you've met, and again, I want to emphasize the fact is you've met these people from basically all across the world. We get a little bit of that in Normandy, but you don't get many more truly international battles than the Monte Cassino, just in the number of languages spoken by the men and women who were there. So let's hear some of your stories. So this is one of them. So let's hear about Alex.
Yeah, Sergeant Alex Jackson. So that's a wonderful story. Like many are very unique stories. All are unique stories, but in this case, so that was just a few years before I had started to guide in Monte Cassino, and the son of Alex contacted me. His name is Gordon, and he said, my father met one of the comrades and was very upset because he told him that years ago he had been invited in Narni, which is a town in Umbria, north of Rome, that was liberated by the Lothians and Borders in June 44. So, but he had not been invited in this ceremony. So there was like the mayor doing the ceremony for all the Lodians because they liberated the town on the 30th June 1944. That's after the Battle of Cassino. He had fought in Cassino as well, and then advanced to Narni. So I said, really, I don't know much about Narni, but I can find out. So I called the municipality of Narni, and they told me, look, so the mayor is 15 years ago, I was not the mayor, but I know that all the invitations were sent. I don't know why Alex didn't get it, but we are ready to do the same for him. So because these veterans years ago, they were given the honorary citizenship of Narni. And so that's why Alex came, because he was sponsored by the British government as, I don't know if you heard this Heroes Return lottery. And so he came with all family. So they were like 3 generations. So his wife, daughters, son, granddaughter. So, and then we went to Narni, and that is a pictures of the mayor giving the honorary citizenship, and so Alex was so emotional and so happy that of what happened, and that he became, the honorary citizenship. He was involved in Cassino, in the last Battle of Cassino, and he said he was fine to talk about anything, but not what they call the Rapido River. He was a truck driver, and he was bringing ammunitions by the Rapido River, and the Rapido River, which is actually the Gary River.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Gary River, but it's known as Rapido. So, and he was, he said he was okay to talk about anything, but that was just an awful experience that he wanted to forget. And he said once he told me then that when they were bringing the trucks, he couldn't stop the truck, like he couldn't stop, because otherwise there would be lights and the Germans would see them. So he was one of the 4. There were 4 drivers, and there were so many trucks and so many bodies laying, and they couldn't stop the truck. They had to go on. So he said that once he was from in a town near Edinburgh, and he said that he would meet often some of the comrades who were with him in that occasion. I mean, in that had experience. And one of his co-driver, 50 years after, in Edinburgh, in a traffic jam, he lived the same experience, and he was brought under shock in an hospital. So
Wow.
that's yeah. So Alex, when he came, he was 91 years old, and he passed away in 2019. I had invited in 2019, for the 75th anniversary, and he said his wife was not doing too well, so he couldn't come. I wanted to invite him as a guest. And then he was fine, but he had a problem on a foot, and he went to the hospital because he was doing medication, and he died at the hospital. So he's actually his son Gordon wrote me an email about that. Unfortunately, that was many years ago, and maybe at that time that I started to do the battlefields, I was not aware of what honor to have these people, because unfortunately now they're not around anymore.
Yeah. No, I feel that way. When it seemed to be normal to meet veterans, I mean, I was always respectful, but it's only now they've gone I realized how I should have been. I mean, I did pay attention, but it was truly special, and I don't think I took enough notice of it. And you were talking about the fact that the Italian campaign is forgotten. Have you ever met veterans or families that have felt a bit kind of they were betrayed or let down, or the public should know, a bit bitter about the fact the Italian campaign is less understood?
No, yes, not really that they I don't know what you mean.
Well, I
But
mean, the fact that families turning up saying, "Oh, there's always things on the television about D-Day and Normandy and the Battle of Britain," but
yes, maybe I found that especially for Polish descendants,
right,
because not only of the Italian campaign forgotten, but they were forgotten and not recognized. So
right,
that is a very bitter feeling, because we don't want to forget that these soldiers were almost all former deportees from the
yeah,
Gulag in
yeah, yeah,
Siberia. Yeah, especially on that relatives. I had this feeling that they were very very sad about everything. That they said, what are we fighting for? If they were fighting for in Italy, but they were fighting for a free Poland, and then they couldn't go back home.
yeah, tragic.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on. Another photo of you with a veteran. So,
Yes, that's actually another veteran who came. His name was Zlainov, 34th Division, Red Bull, and they were part of the Fifth Army, and the Fifth Army in Italy was composed mainly by National Guards. They had very little training, so not much experience, and they were fighting on the mountains in continuous frontal attack. Um, Sly told me that, so Sly wanted to come back, but he came back when his mother passed away with his son Tim, and then here there's a very emotional page, because he came in that week of like from the 11th to the 18th May, when there are commemorations. So on the 18th of May we were up on Monte Cassino, and there were some other veterans. So from a distance I didn't know really what nationality, but when we got closer, so that we realized they were German paratroopers, and German paratroopers that were actually fighting in Cassino. And so they look each other, Sly and Kurz, and this German paratrooper hugged him and told him "Kamerade." So that really it's emotional, because you understand that moment that everybody suffered.
yeah,
So I mean, because sometimes in Italy you have the German occupation, the Allied bombing, so it's difficult really. But I mean, I didn't have in 20 years many Germans coming, mainly German that like relatives of German soldiers
right,
who died in Cassino, and they emigrated elsewhere, because I don't speak German. So they came from Australia, for example, their father. But there are stories also on the German side, or the three stories that I have, very emotional, because you understand that really everybody suffered. Uh, Now, my father was 8 years old during the war, and he had not a bad experience with the Germans' occupation. And in fact, after the war, he went to Germany to work for 6 months. Then he came back because it was too cold. So you say too rainy, I can't live there. But but he always said one thing were the regular soldiers, and one thing were the commander, the true believers. So
yeah,
as a child, he could understand the difference. And he said the regular soldiers, the army, the Wehrmacht, really they were trying to, because of course they occupied Frosinone, and they were trying to protect, because Frosinone was bombed 60 times from September 43, so from the moment we surrendered, to May 44. And of course, all the towns along Route 6 were bombed. And and of course, the Gustav line and Cassino in the middle, Cassino was razed to the ground, that there was not even a wall left, or maybe a wall left of the town. So
well, Well, amazing stories, and I say you're right about the casino campaign being a great level in terms of the experience. I mean, the weather, everybody had the same, whether you're on the Axis or the Allies. So whether you're New Zealander or German or French or American, the weather, the cold, the mud, the shell fire, the bombing, the experiences were very similar. But when you send me these photos, I have not seen a better dressed veteran in my life.
He was so elegant, and so he came back 73 years. In that pictures to the left, he's 20 years old, and he actually, his birthday is 10th of March. So 10th of March 1944, he was 20 years old, just 5 days before the bombing of Cassino, and he said he remembered the bombing of Cassino. So he's actually a Free French, 3rd Algerian Division. He said that, of course, he spoke French because it's a French colony, but he never been to France before the war. And only in the 60s he moved to France and lived in Marseille. But next to us is his grandson. His grandson is a British doctor, and he didn't want to fly because he didn't want to take a plane. So he actually went from London to Marseille by car, picked up his grandfather, and brought in Cassino. So, and that day in Cassino, in 2017, January 2017, he came and was actually snowing. And he said that's just to welcome him because he remembers so much snow, so much cold. He said that was so cold in Cassino because they were up on the mountain, and his ear frostbite. So he said that he was the youngest of his regiment, and his commander, he knew him from Algeria. So he was not his friend, but he knew him. And he said because he was the youngest one, and he had other two comrades, and they had to attack a mountain, which is Monte Marino, and today that's actually the place where is the German cemetery, right. Just on the slope. So he didn't know. He said, when he came, he said, I want to go to Monte Marino because that was where I attacked for the first time. And so he said they went up and they were successful. And his commander told him, stay close to me because I'm a barack man. In French means I'm a lucky barack. I remember this word. Now I understand some French, but I don't speak French. And so he's, of course, he was my guest. I was so happy to have him on the tour. And his grandson, was the translator. So he said that time on Monte San Marino they were successful and no one died. But then after the Battle of Cassino, after Italy was sent to France on the Vosges area.
Yeah.
And he said at that time, the three of them, same situation, with the commander attacking a high ground, and he's the only one that survived.
Wow.
So all the others' friends died. I think for the veterans that I met, the only regret, really, the real regret was was the death of their comrades, their friends.
Yeah. Survivor's guilt.
Survivors, yeah. And that was the fact that they were family for them, for I mean for the period of the war.
And you send these photos here. That there's obviously yes. So tell us the story.
Yeah. So now with Norbert, we went up to Monte Cassino, and the one you see on the left is Dom Germano. He's actually he was a monk of Monte Cassino. Unfortunately, he died. He passed away 2 years ago. And it, going to Monte Cassino without him, it's not really the same thing. It was the living memory of Monte Cassino. And I told you know everything. He said, I was here. Of course, I know everything. He was a student of Monte Cassino. In Monte Cassino, there was the Noble College of Monte Cassino that for centuries have been there and closed down only in 1991. And he was the headmaster, the last headmaster. He was really a well of knowledge. He actually taught to the children Greek, Latin, French, geography, history. And then they had a connection because, so Norbert was actually attacking, trying to liberate his hometown, and the Don Germano hometown was Terelle, which was on the slope of Monte Cassino. It's actually on the slope of Monte Cairo, about 1,000 meters high. The fact that everyone thinks about Monte Cassino, but Monte Cassino is 520 meters high, and is surrounded by high mountains, high points. And so they spoke, and they actually, because of course Don Germano spoke French very well, and they.
And Andreas is asking, how old was he when he died, the monk?
So he was 92 years old.
And that, maybe we can talk about that later, the fact that in your time guiding the battlefields, the veterans have passed away, but also the people who were there, who lived through it, have passed away as well.
You're absolutely right, because during doing my guiding, I met so many people that were actually part of the battle, like civilians, children that were there. And now, so I go to this town like Sant'Angelo, where I met like people, and they all passed away, and it's really sad not to see them.
And it's all the more reason why sharing these stories is important, because people are saying, the Monte Cassino battle is a complex one involving numerous nations and tens of thousands of troops, and it can just end up being arrows on maps if you're not doing it without the personal input of the people who fought through it. And that's where it always brings it home, is the individual experiences. And we'll move on to the one here. So this when you sent me that one, that thought, the cover of the book there drew my attention. So we've got a Taylor this time.
Yes, Elizabeth Taylor, but she married an English man called Taylor, but she's a Polish. Her mother and father were Polish. Both of them were deported to the gulags in Siberia, and her mother was pregnant when she was taken by the Russians and brought to Siberia. So there, her baby brother was born, but died of starvation. And then there is also another story in it, because her father was part, of course, of the Anders Army. When in 1941 there was the so-called amnesty. So the Poles actually from Siberia, they arrived to Iraq, the so-called book of Norman Davies' Trail of Hope, where they actually reached Iraq, and they were under the British 8th Army. So in the gulags, she told me a story that is part of the book that she wrote, and it's an incredible book, because so writes about her family, but also about Poland, and so when the mother and the father were in Siberia, so the baby brother died, and there they met again some people that were deported from the same town. And one of the person I sent, I think, a picture of him, Andrei Dolecki. That's his father. That's her father, and of course, so the mother. So while the father came to Monte Cassino, the aunties, because she had two aunties and the mother, both deported to the same gulag. She said, Elizabeth, they were lucky, because some families they couldn't find each other anymore, they couldn't connect anymore. But that day they were celebrating a birthday, so the whole family was brought to the same gulag. And then when there was the amnesty, the father, of course, and Anthony, he joined Anders' army, and also his friend and Andrew, while the family were relocated is Andrew Dolecki. So when actually the first time that Elizabeth came, because she came a couple of times before the book and after, and she wanted to find the grave of Andrew, because while the father survived, but Andrew died, and so she knew that he died in Cassino, but in fact he died because he was wounded in Cassino, then moved to the hospital near Bari, where there was the main hospital, which is quite far, and he's buried there in Bari. His auntie Antonina and Andrew fell in love in their town when they were very young, but then the family thought that Andrew was not wealthy enough for Antonina, so he married someone else, and they were also all in the same gulags when the wife of Andre died of typhus, and Antonina helped her as she could. And Andrew actually made also, because he was very good to work with the wood, and so he made a little crib for her baby brother. So, but eventually Andrew and Antonina were free, to be together. But with the amnesty, Andrew came. So Andrew joined Andre's army and actually came to fight in Cassino, and there he was killed. Wow. Antonina never married, because he said that Andrew was the only man she could love. But when she was in India, she had a few rubli, and she made a ring because she wanted to give to Andrew. Andrei. I don't know how to. I don't think it's the right pronunciation in Polish.
Wow. But, as we said earlier, you could pretty much look at an atlas of the entire world, and people came from everywhere to fight at Cassino. The mountains of Nepal, the India, New Zealand, the prairies of the USA, the northern part of Canada. They came from everywhere to Cassino. Truly international. And it's we don't think of gulags as having anything to do with Cassino, but the Pole, thank you for bringing this story to us. So we'll keep on going, and we've got another one here about San Pietro.
Yes, that's another wonderful, sad story, but that I was involved in searching a family that had met Frank during the war. So her grandniece, Susan, contacted me, and he said, look, I have some letters of my great uncle. He was adopted by this family, the family of Susan. He was Italian American, but Frank had lost both parents for the Spanish flu. So in 1918, both parents died. So he and his brothers were put on a train, and like an orphanage train, and they were adopted by the family Moster. So actually the neighborhood adopted all the brothers, so they could continue to live close. And Frank was actually the spirit of the family. He was very active, and the family was not rich. So for example, he had a friend in Canada, and he didn't have the money to go to Canada. That's before the war. And so he biked from Fort Worth to Canada to meet his friend. So when he was actually sent to Italy, because he spoke Italian, of course, he landed in Salerno with the 36th Division. And Salerno also is a wide area. So the Texans were involved in attacking Altavilla, which is on a high ground. There he met the Perna family, because he spoke Italian and he could, have information from the Italians about the Germans' positions. And he got really close to the Perna family, so that they exchanged letters. So he sent this name to the, he wrote the name of Perna in the letters that he sent home. So that's why when he died, because after 2 weeks he was sent to Cassino, and he told the family, and especially to the sister of a person that then I met, Lucia, he said, so he liked Lucia, and he said, I feel I can't make it. to Cassino. But if I survive, I will come back and marry you. So, when actually I got involved with this research, so I knew the name Perna. There was in the location Serre, which is a small town. So what I did, I saw the phone directory book, and there were two Perna. I called the first one, and I said, I'm calling because someone called Ernesto Perna met an American soldier. And this lady told me, yes, I know what you mean. Just one moment, I'll call my husband. And the husband was actually the son of Ernesto Perna. So, which is to the right, the man standing is Massimo Perna. And that's his son, Ernesto, that I initially called because I saw the same name. So, and then what happened is that the father of Massimo, because he got information from American that Frank had been killed in Cassino. So he actually, from Salerno, arrived to Cassino area, to the temporary cemetery, took a picture of the grave, of the temporary grave, and sent it to the family in America. So when Susan arrived, she had some pictures, and Massimo had just the same pictures.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's another, and that became a book because it's the caves in San Pietro.
Yeah,
That actually, it's when that pictures that you showed.
I just showed the book there so people can make a note of it, so they can go online and order it.
Yeah, and so here I'm in Dallas because I went to Texas in 2015, and these are actually people that I met during my tours, and so we had like a reunion in Texas, in Dallas. When they knew, from my Facebook page that I was going to Texas, so I went a different part of Texas, and I met different relatives of veterans that I actually had the honor.
I think sometimes, Danila, people think that tour guides, whether it's in London, Normandy, Italy, are just kind of reading a script, and they're just, it's just, here's a thing to your left and here's a thing to your right, and over there is this. When a lot of the job of a tour guide is bringing together your knowledge with the group's knowledge, doing some research, building it all up, and then creating this unique experience for each set of visitors. And it's, the tour guide is it's an interesting word, but it's something. I don't think it always covers the range of skills that are involved.
It's true.
Battlefield guiding, research, analyst, just speaking to people, getting on with people, very important.
Yeah. So that's why I say every experience is unique, and then I always learn every day, because in Cassino, but also in Italy, but I think everywhere, there were so many, so many facts that it's not only visiting the battlefield. It becomes an experience, and you connect with these people.
Yeah,
and when I do research about a person, like it happened to Frank or other, so you really feel this person, and it's sad for you that they were killed so young. They couldn't live their life. And so it's very emotional. I wouldn't like to do anything else in my life. I came, as I say, the first questions, I came by chance, meeting this group of veterans. I was their cultural guide. But that's a living history. It's very emotional, because you meet people that had wrote this important page, and I feel part of that.
Yeah, so, definitely. And we've got another story coming up now. So clearly, this is another family you connected with the past. So tell us this story.
Also from Texas again. So the Meeker family. So this so there are two. So the first to the left is Steve Meeker that contacted me, and he said, my father, Franklin Meeker, during the war, he actually did 500 flights. He was in a light plane doing reconnaissance. I'd like to see, because he spoke about his field, like the airfield, and I'd like, to see where the airfield was. Now, that's not something easy, but sometimes it's lucky that comes into it, and many times in my work, lucky was big part of it, because for example, I did the research. I found the coordinates of this airfield that the Americans were using south of Cassino on the Appian Way. But when you find the coordinates, they're not exact 100%. So they can be like 500 to 1 kilometers. And so I just put this coordinate on the GPS, drove there on the upper way. We arrived, and there was a field, long enough. There could be an airfield. So we stopped. They took some pictures, but I told them, this could be, here there are fields everywhere. We don't know exactly what portion. But and when we were going away, I actually found this man that was walking, and I said to him, so do you know by chance if there was an airfield that the Americans used in this area? And he told me, no, I've been waiting 50 years for these questions, because I bought it. I bought from the couple, from an old couple. He said he was not from there, but he bought from this couple, and this couple described, he said, it's about 200 meters from here. It's my property. And he said, if you met my son, for example, he doesn't know. I mean, I'm the only person now, because they all passed away, the people that were here during the war. And so that's why we found the fields. They said that they were, showed us the olive trees that were cut because of the field, and then invited us, like good, healthy Italian hospitality, to drink a coffee, strong coffee, maybe to his house. And that's, how we found out, how
they're great, those stories. And there he is, the pilot.
They sent the pictures of him, so he could hang the pictures. This was one of the pilots, my father.
Wow. And there he is with his aircraft.
Yes, exactly.
What an amazing story.
He was an American GI of the 36, but he said he was sad. He was sick to be in the mud and rain all day. There was a job for an air observer. I take it. And so he did like 500, how do you say, flights?
Flights, yeah.
Flights.
And so, this meeting with people, and you're bringing these people to us for the first time. But the next story, in fact, our last story, for anybody watching this from Britain or anybody who's a football fan, is your connection with Gary Lineker, the infamous, famous Gary Lineker. So this was a few years ago now. So some people will know that Gary Lineker's father was in the Cassino campaign. So tell us how you got involved in that project and his story.
Yeah, no, it's just the film director. They contacted me, and but just very last minute. So she came ahead of time to see, to do some research, to find out where the field, the dressing station was used by the grandfather of Gary Lineker. And I didn't know it was Gary Lineker. They said it's a VIP important person. So when I met him in August, they told me, but I didn't know him, to tell the truth, because I know it's a very famous football player. So when I told my brother, I said, I want an autograph by Gary Lineker, because it's, of course, a big football player. But I was able to stay just 2 days, because I had booked my vacation, like end of July. It's very warm, so I don't get many tours. And in this period, I was going to France, to Champagne, because I'm a certified sommelier. That's one of my passions. And also food and wine become... Of
course, you're Italian, of course.
Yeah. But also in France, I think food and wine, it's part of the experience. So, and then, here it's one of the scenes of the documentary, My Granddad's War, and we arrived in Sipicciano, which is on Monte Cassino, south of Cassino, a monster of a mountain, where the British were involved in November, December 43. And that's actually connected also with another story because the first attack was where the Grenadier Guards that attacked Monte Cassino and having heavy casualties. Monte Cassino, it's over 1,000 meters high, more than Cassino. And actually there was a British soldier, a British officer that I met. His name was Mike Sterling, and his uncle had been missing, as many others. He was a Grenadier Guard, and he said, "I'm so mad about the fact that nobody knows about Monte Cassino." So, because Monte Cassino gets all the attention, but Monte Cassino was not easy at all, and was part of the winter line south of Cassino, that the Germans called Reinhard or Bernard line. But the British and the Grenadier Guards had huge casualties in November 43 and December 43. When was in Allied hands, then this became an area that the British used as like for hospital, behind the lines. And this is when the grandfather of Gary Lineker was involved as a medic. In the last battle, he was rescuing soldiers at the dressing stations, was actually here in Sibiciano on Monte Cassino.
Brilliant stuff. And we're going to move it to on a bit now, because I want to talk more about when you're doing we'll show the photo where he signed his autograph to you.
Yeah.
Because obviously when you're doing a tour for a family who've got a connection, you obviously follow a specific route. But when you've just got people, a group of British or a group of New Zealanders, how do you plan a Battle of Cassino? I mean, obviously, folks, I should draw your attention to the fact that the link to Danila's website is in the description below. There's lots of information there, videos and maps, things like that. And you have these set tours that you do. But when you're planning a tour for an average group, do you stick with one nation? Do you go back and forth across the battlefield? How do you approach bringing such a complex subject to visitors?
Yeah, so it's actually, if there's no connection at all, so I'll do, of course, the visit of Monte Cassino, the high ground, famous battles, like, for example, of course, Point 593, which is one of the strongest German defense positions. So it's actually the Monte Cassino, the Abbey is always part of it. And Monte Cassino has been rebuilt, but there are scars of the battle. So you can see parts that are new, parts that are old. So Monte Cassino, it's always part of the battle. And the war cemeteries. So like there's the Polish war cemetery by the Abbey, and then the Commonwealth cemeteries. If we go, if we have, actually, it's just tomorrow that I have 5 British, no connection for 2 days. Because, you can spend more than 1 day in Cassino for sure.
Yeah.
So I generally start from the winter line. So chronologically, it's where the battle started. So winter line. That's the Italian cemetery, because maybe not it's not very well known that the Italians reformed an army in December 43. The first motorized group, and fought with the 36th Texas Division in the Battle of San Pietro. Mignano Gap, so south of Cassino, these locations. So the cemetery and the location of the battles. Also, south of Cassino, there's a unique example of a town destroyed during the war, not rebuilt, frozen to 1943, when the Texans liberated the town. The new town was rebuilt down the valley, so you have the ruins of the town. And because most of the towns were destroyed, in not only in Cassino, but I mean from Cassino to Rome along the Highway 6. So there you have a town that is frozen to 1943. So you can see the damage of the war. So, and then from there, we actually do the same advance of the Allied to the Rapido, the Gari River, known as the Rapido, and there are memorials and the town of Sant'Angelo. I have pictures and I show them pictures, and and videos on the van while we going from one place to the next, and so that's the approach, chronologically approach.
And I have to say, you've got a very slick website. It's you have the videos on there, you have the maps on there, you have the outlines of where you're going to go, and there are some Normandy guides I know who could take a few lessons from your website. And
that's actually I did my website on my own, and also it must be said that all the videos that I have, it's because during COVID 2 years I didn't work, so
plenty of time to do the revisions.
Everything that was written became a video, because I think with the video you visualize the battlefield, but many people that come to Cassino, they don't know. I mean, they don't imagine that Cassino, it's a beautiful area today, very green, and so people say, no, you hear about the battles, the destruction, but now it's a beautiful, also very difficult sometimes to imagine what hell was in 1943, 1944. And the veterans that I had, that so they can't recognize anything, because what they remember was rubble, dust, and destruction. There was not even one tree. So most of the trees that, there are, especially the ones, the vegetation around Cassino, Monte Cassino, it's all 80 years old maximum time.
So let's talk a little bit about guiding there generally, because I don't do much guiding now, but my other half, Mag, does plenty of guiding. And although there are a lot of tour guides in Normandy, we know the industry is going to carry on, because there are guides half our ages going out there now. The young guides now, I'm a dinosaur to them. They're, a young girl called Marie came round to our house to borrow a book. She's 27. So how is it? What's the future for guiding in Monte Cassino? Because you won't be around forever. The veterans won't be around forever. Are there new people showing interest? Are there younger guides? What do you think the future holds?
So I started, from 20 years ago up to now. I always saw an increasing interest. By initially by children of veterans, but they are getting old as well, because from 20 now, I used to have people of 50s, 60s. Now I have sons of veterans, 70s, 80s or more. The thing is that I worry about the future of Cassino, because there's not like you go to Normandy, for example. I've seen memorials everywhere, connections. Here there's no connection, there's not really a route. So I think it's difficult, and the new guides, new generations don't really know much about it. When I told you I studied ancient history, and I start to do contemporary history, so it's useful, because then from the ancient history to the contemporary. But when I wanted to do something focused on the Italian campaign, there was nothing. So I think the school needs to teach what happened, because otherwise I see the future not very promising.
And is there an ambassador, if you like, in Italian history? I mean, in Britain, we have James Holland, who writes a lot about, we have Peter Caddick Adams, Mark Zelke was on yesterday, Matthew Parker is on next week or the week after. So his book on Monte Cassino has sold 500,000 copies, which is a lot. But is there anyone, on Italian TV or who's kind of pushing World War II history, or is it alas not?
There's not much about. And in fact, most of my tour, maybe 99.9%, are in English, or with the audience from all over the world, but not in Italy. So this, if the school doesn't change the system, then I'll just tell you one thing. For example, on the 70th anniversary, for the first time, I saw in television a program like at 8 p.m. about what happened in Italy. He said after after 70 years we can talk about it. And then there was Italian partisans that participated, because we have the partisans that gave a great contribution to the advance of the Allies, but this is also a page not known.
Yeah.
So on the 25th of April, that 10 years ago, on the 70th anniversary, they were talking about the liberation. What's the liberation of Italy? Because we have a national holiday, 25th of April. And they were interviewing students or young people on the street, and they did not know. So this veteran partisan that was on television was very upset, but he said, it's not the fault of this. It's not the fault of these young lads. The fault is the school. So, and the system, they should change and teach, teach what happened, because we come from there. That's our last, my generations come, and my father generations come from the war.
We'll have to put you in touch with the O'Sullivan brothers, because Edmund and Richard, who are regulars on my channel, they've held conferences their father fought in Tunisia and Sicily in Italy, and they've started organizing conferences, and they had one in Sicily earlier, and they're gonna and I think the good thing about, well, perhaps something like World War II TV is we have viewers all the way around the world. There are historians across the world, and maybe at some point we could do an international conference somewhere near Monte Cassino, where we bring historians from South Africa and New Zealand and Poland and Britain, and someone like yourself can be our boots on the ground there, and we can try and do something and draw attention to it, because I don't want to go off into a big kind of political rant, but one of the best symbols for me of Monte Cassino is nations working together, because that's slugging their way over those hills. We said it earlier, were Indians and Gurkhas and Poles, and some of them had years of more troubles to face, but together they worked to get rid of the Third Reich. So there's a very positive message about togetherness and putting differences aside. So I'd love to see something in the future where Monte Cassino can draw people in, and we can discuss the battles and the outcome, and that would be nice to see.
I see at the university now they're starting to do some classes about more about the Italian civilians, like massacres, caught in the middle. So from the Italian perspective, they started to, like, for example, during COVID, there was a conference of different teachers, professors of university, starting to write about, like the bombing, the civilians caught in the middle. And that's, a way to start to talk about what happened.
And as you said earlier, you say that perhaps people haven't got an interest in World War II, but as you said there, that highway was significant 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. World War II is still, the effects of World War II are still affecting us today. The world is still troubled by events that were 80 years ago. So understanding the history is helping us, or should help us, understand the future as well. And I think that it's a shame. I take it for granted, because I live in Normandy, that there's so much going on, because it is an area where there is lots of interest, but it isn't the same everywhere. There are other battlefields where there isn't the interest. But it's really been a fantastic chat to you, Danila, and I hope that there are some. Maybe someone watching this is going to be inspired to go to there and become a tour guide and set things up, because I'd hate to think that in 20 years time, 30 years time, 40 years time, there isn't someone like yourself who can give people these experiences, because you've clearly learned a lot, and I'm glad you brought all these stories to us.
Yeah, actually, no, I want to end with something that I really like to say. When actually on the 25th July 43, Mussolini was arrested after 20 years. People was like 21 years of regime. And then I don't know if you know an Italian writer, Umberto Eco. He is actually it's not about the Second World War, but he actually was awarded of many prizes. So at that time, when on the 25th July 43, he was 12 years old. And his mother heard the news on the radio that Mussolini had been arrested and told him, go run on the kiosk and buy the newspaper, because he was used to have one newspaper. I mean, that was a fascist bulletin, so no information, or on one side of the information. So when he arrived to the kiosk, he said he saw many newspapers, and he said, I was 12 years old, but I was quite clever, and I understood these newspapers were not printed overnight, so there was an underground press. And I say, then I actually looked and I choose the title that I like more, and in this moment I was born as a free man. So that's, I think it's very important to remember. We don't have to take the freedom for granted.
Yeah.
And always preserve and do our part, so that
well, there's people. So Peter has said, I will definitely try and do a tour with Danila. She has so much knowledge and seems a great storyteller. So, and Andreas was going to book with you, but then no, that was but where was his message earlier? It was I can't find it now. There he is. I had planned to do a tour with Danila, but then COVID came. So, but Andreas is always touring. He'll be with me and Normally in October, so maybe he'll go there next. So it's been fantastic talking to you, and I'm glad that there's someone like you there doing all this incredible work, because it is important that these people were able to come back and have a connection with the past, and those connections will spread out and people will grow and understand. And as I said earlier, battles aren't just arrows on maps, they're people, and people's experiences are important. So it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. Don't forget, folks, to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out Danila's website. We'll be back tomorrow with Peter talking about how the Allies learned to knock out Tiger tanks, so that'll be fantastic. So thank you, everybody. I will see you all tomorrow. This is Paul Woodadge for WW2TV saying enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Cheers, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.